what's up you guys, the Curious Owl here, and before I start this video, I want to say I'm sorry for this not being my usual setup for videos. If you guys watch my On My Shelf book tag I posted, then you know that I accidentally left my camera and stuff at my apartment when I came home this weekend, so this is not exactly the way I would normally have my videos, but I'm rolling with it and filming on my camera, on my phone camera, basically. So this week's Top 5 Wednesday is discussing classic novels or stories that you wish had more modern adaptations. So the first one is actually probably one of the most classic adapted novels, and that is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Jane Austen is one of those authors that I think her work has stood against the test of time because she wrote things in a time where it was very taboo for her to make any kind of comment about society and how women are viewed in society, and is one of those novels, especially Pride and Prejudice, that really kind of hits the nail on the head with how women are kind of viewed within society and how they are seen as only property to be kind of sold off to husbands and things of that nature, and how men, especially in this time period, had thought that women were just, property for theirs to obtain when they wanted, and that was not right. So I really like the story a lot. I love reading it anytime I get a chance to read it. It's one of those classic novels that am surprised I can read through and understand completely, because I have a hard time usually with classic literature, with reading it. I wish, though, that there was a more modern adaptation of it. I do believe that there is one book that's recently come out called Pride by, I don't remember who it was, but somebody just recently came out with a book called Pride that's supposed to be a black adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, but I'm not sure. I feel like that's supposed to be what it is, but I want to see kind of taking the scenario of Pride and Prejudice and putting it in a more modern setting, because I think it would be really cool. And I think instead of it having be a family of girls dealing with husbandry stuff, I would like to see it kind of be more of a group of girlfriends, like basically just they all are super close and they've all been friends their entire lives, and seeing them all kind of going off with these different men, and kind of it just being placed in a more modern setting and having some kind of more modern social issues and problems that are kind of associated with the idea of marriage. Next is the novel Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. Anne Bronte is kind of the lesser known of the Bronte sisters because, Charlotte Bronte wrote Wuthering Heights, and Emily Bronte was also a novelist. Anne, I think, was not as well received as the other Bronte sisters because Anne, I think, tended to write more hard-hitting things than I think was deemed okay in the 19th century, and Agnes Grey is kind of one that discusses Anne's own personal experiences with being a governess and having to move from family to family to teach children, and how sometimes the kids were really, really awful, or sometimes the families were awful and the kids were kind of just products of their environment. And I really liked this story a lot. I read it about a couple of years ago and I loved it so much because I was really interested in learning about, what it was like to be a governess, and I didn't realize that there was a book out there that had talked about it. I would like to see this kind of be adapted, though, to kind of being more about, a more modern-day teacher's experience, because you hear all the time in the news how teachers are being criminally underpaid for the work they do, and the fact that a lot of the time they have to use their own money to get school supplies for their classrooms and things of that nature. So I would like to see, what it's like, somebody make a documentary even about being a teacher in America in this time, because I think that it would be really enlightening, just kind of like how this book was very enlightening for me to learn about, the struggles of being a governess and having to move from home to home for various reasons, whether the kids got too old or the families didn't like you or something like that, or you were so overrun by your kids that you're trying to teach that it becomes impossible for you to teach them, and so you have to quit your job. The next one is another Anne Bronte novel, and that is The Tenant at Wildfell Hall. I read The Tenant at Wildfell Hall after I had read Agnes Grey, and this one was a lot darker than Agnes Grey was because it basically discussed the problems associated in this time period with women and abusive husbands. So the main character, I don't remember her name, but she basically runs off with her 5-year-old son after having been in an abusive marriage for several years, and essentially ends up in this new town where she meets this man that falls in love with her because he thinks that she's very mysterious and he doesn't really understand her just yet, but she's very hesitant to communicate with anyone within this town because of the fact that she has left her abusive husband. And in this time period, divorce and, you know, leaving a husband was very much frowned upon. So I really liked this a lot, and I wish that it kind of was made into a more modern adaptation, because there are so many women out there today that deal with abusive relationships and marriages, and it's so difficult for them to be able to leave these relationships because of the fact that they still love the person, or they're afraid to because they know that they could get harmed or even killed by their spouse or significant other that they are in this relationship with. And sometimes they don't think that people are going to be there to help protect them, and they don't think that people are going to believe them when it comes to the fact that they are in an abusive relationship. So I think that this novel has a lot of really contemporary ideas and things that about it that are still very reminiscent today, that I think it would make a really cool modern adaptation discussing a young woman, especially, who is in an abusive relationship and trying to escape it. The next book is another Jane Austen novel, which is Emma, and this I love so much. I ended up using this for inspiration for a Buy a Nobiliathon challenge earlier this year. I thought it was so cool. I got my boyfriend to get in on it, and he was really, really helpful. I had so much fun making this video, and I think that it could easily become a more modern story. I think even like maybe a kind of cheesy rom-com, if you will. The story of Emma basically is about this young woman named Emma who is very much a meddler in people's love lives. She loves to set people up and get them together, and unfortunately when she tries to do that for one of her friends, the guy thinks that she is trying to get with him, and it's not everything kind of goes up in flames from there, and it's really cute and really funny. And I just think that it would make such a great rom-com because it's got like the great plot points of making a really funny rom-com. And finally, the last book that I think should be a more modern adaptation is actually Wuthering Heights by Charlotte Bronte. I listened to the audiobook of Wuthering Heights, I believe earlier this year, if not then last year, and I was not a fan of it. I didn't really like the pacing of the story. I didn't like the main female character of the story. I thought she was very whiny and she was very manipulative. But I would like to see this kind of in a more modern adaptation, because I also had a hard time kind of following the story a lot of times. And I wonder if maybe making it into a more modern story would make it easier for me to go through the story and understand what happened, because it's very much a frame tale where you have kind of stories within stories, because you have characters that are telling the story of this couple to somebody else that after like years have passed since the events of this story. So it would make it, I think, a lot easier to understand the story if it was maybe put in a more modern setting, or you know, maybe even just making a true adaptation of the story and watching it happen. Like, I just would like to see it kind of be put on the big screen, just so that I could try to maybe understand the story a little bit more. But there you guys go. Those are the 5 books that I would like to have more modern adaptations of. Let me know down in the comments below what you think you would like to see a more modern adaptation of, if it's a classic. But thank you guys so much for joining me in this video. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not already and you'd like to be, hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye guys!